So welcome to the second medical school deans panel. My name is David and I'm going to be the moderator. We have our medical school deans here and I'll let them introduce themselves.
So good morning. That was like 10 people. There's like 1,000 of you guys in here. Let's try that again. Good morning. All right, you guys awake? Good, good. So I am Dr. Adam Aponte. I'm the Assistant Dean for Diversity and Inclusion at the Hofstra North Shore LIJ School of Medicine in New York City. How many of you guys have heard of us yet? Not enough. Anyway, so we're just doing introductions now, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So you'll hear a lot more from me later in the 3 hours that I have slated for this discussion.
And good morning. I'm Maurice Clifton. I'm an internal medicine physician and adolescent medicine specialist. I'm the Senior Associate Dean at the Commonwealth Medical College, which is in Scranton, Pennsylvania.
I'm Dr. Steve Given. I'm the acupuncturist on the panel, and I am the Dean of Clinical Education and Academic Assessment at American College of Traditional Chinese Medicine in San Francisco, and the traffic was fine this morning.
Hi, I'm Luce Ortiz, Assistant Dean in the Office of Diversity and Minority Affairs at Jefferson Medical College in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
And I'm Chuck Vega. I'm a family physician, and I'm the Director of the Program in Medical Education for the Latino Community, or PRIME-LC, at UC Irvine, and we're based in Santa Ana, California.
And good morning, I'm Del Wigfall. I'm from Duke University in Durham, North Carolina, in the Triangle, Research Triangle Park. We live right down the road from a light blue school that shall remain unnamed. I'm a pediatrician. I'm a pediatric nephrologist by training, and I am an advisory dean, an associate dean for medical education, and I'm the physician director for the Multicultural Resource Center for the School of Medicine.
Thank you very much. So our first question for the med school deans we'll direct to Dr. Aponte, and after his answer, we will open it up for discussion to any deans who want to chime in. So the first question, Dr. Aponte, what is the best way to overcome a low GPA?
Not get one. I'm actually looking at myself on camera, though. I'm going to make sure my tie is straight. No, I mean, look, one of the things that we talk about, and I'll try to sort of make this brief, and I'm sure all my colleagues have comments on that. You know, what we look for in students is there are going to be challenges to all of us. And what I tell students is don't be discouraged by any one grade that you get in undergrad school. Obviously, we want you guys to achieve as well as you can academically, because that opens up a lot of doors. But realize that academics is not the only thing we look for in sort of our medical school applicants. I think you heard some folks mention the holistic review process. Those of you who are not familiar, I really encourage you to get to the AAMC website, aamc.org, and look at holistic review and look at all the other attributes and experiences that we're looking for in students. Having said that, depending on what your overall GPA is, there are different advice that you will get regarding what you can do to help improve that. Clearly, what we look for is grade improvement over years. So some of you who are freshmen came to UC Davis for the very first time, and you rushed this frat house, and you went to that sorority party, and before you knew it, you came out first year with a 1.9. And you're like, oh my goodness, right? So, okay, now what do you do over the next couple of years? And if what we're looking for is how did you improve yourself? Not how you felt, but how you recovered over the next years. And so maybe your senior year, you finish up with a 3.4 that semester, that year, but your overall GPA is only going to be about 3.0, because as you guys quickly realize when you do the arithmetic, right, that's the political thing now, the arithmetic, you understand that it's hard to get that GPA up overall once you start accumulating some credits. But when we see a progression each semester, you're doing better and better in science courses, we like to see, you know, that's something that shows us, okay, this is a better student today than they were 4 years ago. If the overall GPA is still very low, then your options are going to be either a post-bac program and a master's program. And I think to go into a post-bac program, master's program, that's like a whole nother panel discussion. And I would encourage you guys to sort of talk to folks about it. There are probably, I don't know how many medical schools are here today. Let's say there are 50. There's probably going to be about 100 different opinions on what you should be doing as far as either a post-bac or a master's program. But there are ways to enhance your GPA and improve the way you are. So don't be discouraged by one particular grade, one semester, but realize you want to get stronger each year and show that today, 3 years later, 4 years later, I'm a much stronger student than I was 2 or 3 years ago.
I agree with everything that he said. The one other group that I see fairly often is students who something bad happens to them. It could be medical, it could be a family issue that comes up and just sort of knocks them off track. And then if you can explain how you rebounded from that and show that even though something really bad happened to you, you were able to recover from it and go on and succeed, that can actually be a strength. Not that you want to go out and have something bad happen to you on purpose, but overcoming obstacles is something that we look for as well.
And I don't think that many times it's easy to do that on your own. And this may sound a little touchy-feely, but there are more people who believe in you than you know. So use your resources. One thing we've had a lot of success with is peer mentoring and peer tutoring. And particularly students who have had some of those same struggles can identify exactly where you are making your errors and mistakes. So use those resources and use them early. Before the problems set in, and you'll be amazed at what you can do and be inspired to do great things.
I think also that you have to take into account that from your very first year, you should be meeting with your pre-health advisor, and they should be there to be able to guide you, tell you what more or less you need to do. For those students who get into trouble, of course, that becomes a real issue, and we want to make sure that you get the help at the very beginning and not when you're in so deep that nothing can be done to overturn that academic record.
Thank you very much. So the next question is for Dr. Clifton. Dr. Clifton, what is your school's cultural attitude towards primary care, and can you give a few examples?
That's a good question. I think that nowadays primary care isn't the most popular thing to go into, but it's something that this country really needs a lot. The whole reason that we're in existence is to produce physicians for Northeast Pennsylvania. You might ask why we're here recruiting. It's because Northeast Pennsylvania is actually a pretty cool place to live, and so we're trying to get you to come out there and live and be a doctor. Once you get in, so we're looking for students who have a propensity to going into primary care. Once you get in, we have a curriculum that really is excellent for a primary care physician, but it's also, we have a lot of community-based activities and curriculum, but we also believe that if you go into dermatology, if you're a community responsive dermatologist, that's still pretty cool. So especially if you're in Northeast Pennsylvania.
Are you from Northeast Pennsylvania by any chance?
Actually, I am. That's this guy's sharp. Watch out for this guy. So we have a curriculum. So we have the admissions committee is looking for people to go into primary care. We have a curriculum that is focused on primary care, and then but then we support you whatever you want to go into.
Would anyone else like to chime in?
At our school, I mean, we're not particularly focused on one primary care versus specialty care. We're sort of trying to create physicians. And I don't want to talk too much about our schools because you're going to go to the workshops, you're going to go to our tables, and we'll talk more about that. But, you know, I would say to you that this country needs primary care physicians. I'm a general pediatrician, and I love what I do as far as pediatrics. And there still is a great opportunity to go into primary care and really have an impact on the lives of individuals. Prevention is really the key to cure. And when you have a strong group of primary care physicians out there taking care of communities, then we can sort of really impact the health disparities that we see in this country. So we want to make sure that if you want to be a primary care physician at our school, you're going to be the very best you can. If you want to be a neurosurgeon, we can do that too.
I think it really becomes a matter of definition. I think, as everyone has said, there's no reason why an internist can't be considered a primary care physician, and very often they are, much like a general pediatrician. So I think in terms of mentality, I am a lifelong pediatrician. I love kids when I was young, I love kids now, and that's part of the reason why I have the practice that I do, even though I did specialize in nephrology. Now, having said that, I think there are people who are at this point invested in a future that really is in primary care. We're fortunate now, I think, going into our third year of admitting a class of students that includes a small sector of folks who have an expressed interest in primary care. It's a primary care leadership training track. So it's done with intent and with support, fiscal support for the students as well, to allow them to evolve a career that is more self-directed and more directed toward primary care medicine. We're not the only school in the country that's doing that now. I think we're all struggling with trying to find the right construct for the appropriateness education for our future physicians. So even as you come into medical school, what exists now is going to be different than what will exist tomorrow. The whole notion of using team-based learning, evidence-based medicine, there's a lot of acronyms that'll get thrown at you as you learn more about what is to come. And even then, once you get there, it may look a little different. And that's because we're still struggling with what's appropriate.
Thank you, Dr. Wigfall. Dr. Given, in a brief, a few sentences, what makes your school unique, and what is the added value of going to your school?
Thank you. So, as I said earlier, I'm the token acupuncturist here on the panel, and American College of Traditional Chinese Medicine is one of over 60 acupuncture programs in the United States. We are currently licensed in 45 states and the District of Columbia as non-physician acupuncturists. Obviously, it's a different route to the practice of a form of medicine. It's relatively new in the United States. It's been here only since it's only been openly practiced here since the early 1970s. It first came here with Chinese immigrants in the 1840s when they were working on the Transcontinental Railroad. But it's relatively new in the healthcare community. It's a unique form of medicine. It has a unique cultural and practice model, quite different from Western medicine. You would still have the opportunity to work with physicians, work with other more mainstream biomedical providers, but you're looking at the body, you're looking at your patient using a new set of tools. It's a holistic practice. We constantly look at the physical, mental state together. We look at it from a holistic perspective. But it's something that I think you should look at, I think you should explore. In traditional Chinese medicine in San Francisco at our institution, we send interns out early in their clinical training to community clinics to work with physicians, to work with other providers.
Thank you. Dr. Vega, so how do you treat a student who's been out of school for several years and has work experience in the medical field?
And has work experience in the medical field?
Correct.
That's outstanding. You know, when I was in medical school, one of my fellow students was an RN. Another was a paramedic, a firefighter. He had actually been part of a small division of firefighters in rural Wisconsin for like 15 years, and they were like gods to us. They strode among us, and they could actually do things and new things. We knew Krebs cycle and a lot of microbiology. They could actually put a line in somebody. They could actually talk to a patient. It's outstanding. I think life experience is exactly what you make of it. And we certainly accept a high number of what's called non-traditional students at UCI, and they enrich not just the class and the school, but they really do enrich their patients too, because you're able to relate to patients on a different level and put them in a different context. So while there's a lot of different paths to medical school, and you'll find your colleagues choose, everybody has their unique model, I think that life experience and that work experience is very valuable. And I would just go on to say the same thing is true if you worked in landscaping or being a software engineer or whatever it may be. You'll bring that to the table and you'll be surprised how much it applies, because at the end of the day, it comes down to some basic things: diligence, integrity, great communication. That's what makes a good physician, and you can use those skills across a wide variety of different jobs.
Yeah, I think that's what we talk about when we talk about holistic review, right? We talk about experience and attributes. What other things have you done? And so this whole theme of non-traditional, actually non-traditional is the new traditional. Everyone has done something different now as they come into medical school, and most schools are looking for that. The more life experiences that you have, that adds value to our educational environment. And when we're talking about treating a country that's much more diverse, the more diversity we have within race, ethnicity, geographic areas, socioeconomic, life experiences, then that enriches our educational environment. So we always look at those types of experiences as well in students, and we really encourage them to have interests outside of the classroom and real life experiences and bring that into our medical schools.
I agree. I also think that it's important to be familiar with all aspects of the application process and be able to bring forward this diverse experience that you bring to the application process. There may be an essay, there certainly will be an interview, and these are all opportunities not just to talk about your GPA and the fact that you know the Krebs cycle, but to talk about the fact that you have done these other things. And it's amazing. People that bring humanities backgrounds are great applicants because they can write, and being able to write is a beautiful thing. So be able to look at the process and talk about all these things that you bring.
Thank you. Dr. Ortiz?
Yes.
One question we have regarding medical education is, how do you structure your class? How do you find diversity and kind of build your incoming medical class?
Well, we have, in our medical school, we get a little over 10,000 applications. So 1 out of 4 students who applies to medical school applies to Jefferson. We do a total review of all the applicants. We're trying to look for students who really have not only had the metrics in place, but also have done a lot of things outside of their comfort zone. For instance, volunteering, having those experiences, clinical shadowing. Some people have done global health programs, going out on mission trips, taking care of the sick, the elderly, going into third world countries and doing all kinds of sustainable projects and healthcare for underserved communities. So with that said, we're looking for a student who actually has done quite a bit of experiences that maybe not most students would do. I'm finding now with the applicant pool that it's becoming a little more difficult to find who we're going to bring in. We bring in 800 students to interview for the 260 seats that we have open. And we will ultimately accept 500 of those students. So with that said, we really read the applications. We look at what you write in your personal statement. That secondary application, you have an opportunity to also state something in an other essay, a second essay. So take the opportunity to really put down and tell about yourself. That's the way we get to know whether we want to bring you in for an interview. And try not to spend too much time trying to make excuses for something that occurred in the past. When we decide to bring you in for an interview, that means we are very interested in you, and therefore you just start preparing to do well on that interview.
Thank you. So Dr. Wigfall, we have a question that was live tweeted to us, and the question's regarding majors in undergrad. What role does your choice of major play in the admissions process?
In all honesty, it doesn't. I'm glad that they asked that question. One, because they asked the question, but also because I can answer it. was afraid I'd get something really ridiculous. I have had, part of what I do professionally is advise medical students. I advise 1/4 of the School of Medicine at Duke. Within that population, I have students who have been foreign language majors, art history majors, science majors, history majors, philosophy majors. Basically, the only commonality is that they graduated from college. So the major is not as critical as fulfilling the requirements that all medical schools have for admission. If you've done that, and if you've done it well, and if you're a good person, if you have reached a sense of self-actualization, if you can self-assess, if you like to learn, if you like people, if you can communicate with something other than an electronic device, if you can actually speak to people. You know, I say that half in jest, but part of really becomes a problem is that we've gotten to the point, and I'm guilty of it as well, as one of my friends now has attested, texting. It's so convenient to sit anywhere, as I'm sure someone in this room is doing now, either tweeting or texting or in some way communicating with someone who's not present. But when you walk into a patient's room, you have to have a focus. You have to be able to talk to them. You have to be able to listen, even more critically listen. And listening is a skill that a lot of folks don't have, to be able to tolerate silence. So it doesn't really matter what your major is, it matters who you are.
Thank you, Dr. Wigfall. So back to Dr. Aponte. Stemming off from Dr. Wigfall's stem on technology, how do you think healthcare is changing with the changing technology that we have today?
Well, I mean, it's evident in everything we do. I mean, one of the things that we're doing with our students currently is we're sort of saying the handheld sono is going to be the new stethoscope. So we're embracing technology. I mean, obviously, nothing takes away from the personal human touch of medicine, right? And I agree with Dr. Wigfall in that. We're not going to walk into an exam room and start texting with our patient, OMG, how are you today, LOL, right? We're gonna be talking to folks, and that personal interaction is something that will never be replaced. However, technology has allowed us to advance medicine, exponentially over the last, 10 years. And as students in the future, you guys will be walking around with handheld sonograms and diagnosing patients. That's going to be your new stethoscope at some point. And we embrace that technology, and we feel that that's really going to help us advance medicine and really make new diagnostic discoveries much quicker at the bedside. But nothing will ever take away from that personal interaction with the human being. So don't ever forget that piece of it. And so learn to interact with people, learn to understand people. Learn when you walk into a room and you ask a patient, how are you? Wait for the answer. I mean, they've shown studies where you ask, how long does it take for a physician to ask the second question when they walk into the room and they say, how are you today, Mrs. Jones? And it's seconds. Ms. Jones hadn't even thought about how she is today. And we're already asking the other questions. The personal touch can never be replaced by technology, but technology has advanced medicine, way beyond our beliefs, and will continue to do so, and we embrace it.
I think it's a blend. I'm going to go ahead and speak for the provider that's using a technology that's 3,000 years old. So some things are different. Something, the use of electronic medical records, for example. We don't actually use handheld sonograms, but now I want to see one. But very simple tools are also still important in healthcare, and so technology is an enhancement, but it's not really the heart of healthcare.
Your point is well taken, Dr. Given. You guys awake today? Acupuncture point? All right.
So Dr. Clifton,
How can I follow that?
we'll give you a broader one. How is medicine changing in your view from the time that you started?
Mike, they didn't hear the question.
Sorry. How is medicine changing in your experience from your beginnings?
Are you saying that I'm old?
No, sir.
Slightly more mature, right?
That sounds like a very epic story. I can't wait to hear the answer. The beginnings.
In the beginning.
Well, back when I took my horse and buggy to medical school. I think the biggest change that I see, in some ways is a challenge, just what we were talking about, is how do you maintain that personal interaction with patients, which is key. With the new electronic health records, where you're actually looking at outcomes of your patient population, and I think that I think the focus on outcomes is probably the biggest change. Sort of the systematization of care, making sure that you're providing the best care you can for all of your patients, and following those outcomes.
Would anyone else like to chime in?
I think the approach to medical education is very different. And you know what? Change is good. And so we don't want to suggest that what we did was right. I think that what we did was right for the time. And what you guys will be doing when you get into whatever higher education you do, that will be right for that time as well. And we embrace that. And I think that, you know, by the time you become a fourth-year medical student, some of the stuff that you learned as a first year has already changed, our understanding of it. And that's the beauty of our field. So we are lifelong learners as physicians because we continue to understand things more and more each day, and we continue to look at ways of teaching students in a different way so they can become lifelong learners and understand that. In medical school, you're going to learn a lot. There's a lot you're not going to learn. And after medical school, there's going to be a lot that you forget because you start focusing in certain areas. But you know, the beauty is that there's a lot of technology out there to sort of keep you up to date on some of the changes in medicine. And as we experience some of those changes, we incorporate that into our curriculum. So at our school, we're going to be changing our curriculum constantly because medicine is changing constantly. And I think that's something you should be looking at as far as medical schools are concerned.
Thank you, Dr. Aponte. So, Dr. Given, what are some challenges facing the medical and health fields today, and how does your institution help prepare students to address these challenges?
A great question. I think the most important thing that my institution is doing to meet the challenge is fostering, focusing on integration. We are all working in a new world that's highly integrated. 20 years ago, I didn't get calls from physicians. I missed them. I wish they'd call. But there really wasn't a high level of communication. Now we have interns in treatment rooms sitting right alongside the physician, learning what they do, dialoguing with them, and understanding how, in an integrative way, we can help the patient. And I think that's our biggest challenge is how to continue to foster integration and communication, team-based care when all healthcare providers are really busy. There's this tendency to, I've got to get to that next patient. I've got to turn over my room, make sure that I'm working as efficiently as possible. But patient-centered care doesn't work that way. Patient-centered care requires collaboration, requires communication, requires providers working together. And I think that is both the healthcare's biggest challenge right now, and I also think that's healthcare's biggest opportunity. My colleagues up here on the table are going to be finding their students working in more and more integrated settings, working with nurse practitioners, working with naturopaths, working with acupuncturists, working with massage therapists, working with a variety of, for the United States, non-traditional providers in new and interesting ways to make sure that patient-centered care means providing the patient with whatever they need to get well.
I would even add to that, in our Introduction to Clinical Medicine course, we have interprofessional teams that are sent out to work with a specific patient. And it's very interesting because now we have the pharmacy student, we have a nursing student, one of the students from the technology program, and one of our medical students going out to actually see patients and try to work in unison and try to come up with the best possible patient care for that specific patient. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that at some of the medical schools as well.
And I would just add that the two realms are obviously not mutually exclusive. If you're really interested in complementary medicine, alternative medicine, you can take a curriculum in medical school which will prepare you so that can be part of your future practice as well. And you'll work with outstanding providers. At UCI, we have a whole center for integrative medicine on campus, which has research opportunities and clinical opportunities for medical students to participate. So they can actually perform acupuncture, they can work with natural remedies and homeopathy. It's really outstanding, and it does add to the patient's experience at the end of the day.
Thank you. Dean Ortiz,
Yes.
as pre-med students, we often hear the word diversity. What does diverse mean?
Oh my God.
He just lobbed you one. there.
Diversity. Oh. In our, one of the things, especially in medicine, has been the idea of bringing in underrepresented students into medicine because of the low number of students in our entering classes nationally. Diversity takes on a whole other direction. We are including LGBTQ students. We are including women, elderly, older students who are coming in, non-traditional students. Quite honestly, half of our entering class has been non-traditional students. And nationally, I believe we're moving into a trend where most of our students are becoming non-traditional students who have been out there working in other careers and doing all kinds of other things before they even decide to come into medicine. So diversity is taking on a whole different role. We're talking gender, we're talking religion, we're talking age, we're talking sex. It even goes as far as geographic location and everything else. So diversity is very inclusive of a lot of things that in the past we did not include. I don't know if anybody else has anything to say on diversity.
For sure, I think that look around, you guys. Take a moment to look around this room, right? This is America, right? And so as we look to improve the health care of our country, we need to reflect that in the physicians and the healthcare providers who are taking care of them, of that country. And so what we're saying is that it is important to look at diversity and incorporate diversity into our medical schools, our residency training programs, our attending physicians, our hospital administrators across the board. Because if we really want to impact the lives of the communities that we serve, we need to understand them. And when you're in a learning environment and you're in a place where everyone comes from the same background, suburban, America, whatever, affluent, and you're trying to learn how do you take care of folks from Appalachia? How do you take care of folks from the South? How do you take care of folks from the inner city? What's their perspective? What is, how does a Latino patient look at medicine? How does an African American look at medicine? How do they interact with you? That is very, very important. And unfortunately, in our profession, the medical profession, we have not had the diversity that we need when it comes to certain groups of individuals. But we broaden that because we understand that there's still a lot of other initiatives that we need to take place, as Dr. Ortiz mentioned, as far as other aspects of human beings. And so that diversity equals excellence. And if we're trying to achieve excellence in medical education, then we have to make sure that we recruit as diverse a patient group of healthcare professionals as we possibly can to treat this ever-growing, diverse country of ours, and so that we can really make an impact on these health disparities. So whenever you guys are looking at any schools, I encourage you, look at how much value they place and emphasis they place on diversity and the importance of diversity and what they're really doing to diversify that class. And it means different things in different geographic regions. I'm from New York City, so Puerto Rican males, African American males, Dominicans, we need more of them. But in Appalachia, we need more docs going back into those communities, in the South, in the Midwest. So there's all different aspects of what we're looking at as far as diversity. So very, very important. Anywhere you go, make sure that they are focusing on diversity initiatives in any school you go to.
Another way to look at that is that back in the old days,
Embrace it, I guess, right?
Yeah. Most of my training was in a lecture room. You know, it seemed like it was about this size. I remember waking up in the middle of a lecture and looking around and realizing at that moment I was the only one in the room that was awake. I guess the lecturer was awake, but basically, you know, it was very passive education. Now, more and more schools are using a lot of active learning and small group sessions and basically teaching students how to learn and giving them the skills so that they can continue learning for the rest of their careers. The more diverse the group is that's working on these problems, the more different backgrounds they come from, whatever metric that is, the better they're going to do as a group to explore the problem. So there's also an educational point to that.
And, you know, there's a really concerted effort at all levels, you know, starting from the AMC down, to make sure that all schools are focusing on diversity initiatives, LCME requirements to make sure schools are focusing on this. They understand the value of this. This is not a quota system we're talking about. This is valuable educational experiences and enriching your educational experiences in medical schools. And so, again, I really, you know, thank you for that question. If that was tweeted, then, you know, that's a great tweet. If not, then that's a great question for you guys. Look at that at every school you go to.
Dr. Wigfall, did you want to?
I think it's worthwhile stating, and it's been said by a number of speakers all morning, that there is a need for diversifying the workforce. There's a reality that the communities now look like this room does, and that's true even in Durham, where there is no longer a racial majority. Knowing that that's the case, and when you look at the makeup, the composition of students in medical school, and particularly the proportion of persons of color in medical school and medical training, there's a disconnect. So part of what is a reality is that you can see diversity when you go to see a medical school in terms of race and age, because those things are visible. Of course, when you get old enough, age becomes sort of a non sequitur because everybody looks younger than you do. But in terms of race, you can see the difference in color, and you appreciate that with that comes a different richness in terms of where those folks have been. And all of those people can add to the educational experiences that you have. Fortunately, we have a medical school class that's really very broadly diverse in color, and that's visible. But I think the other thing is whether or not there is an appreciation for diversity in the greater scheme of things, because we want everyone who graduates from the School of Medicine to be able to communicate and care for a diverse community. So there is diversity that you can see, and there's a diversity that you can appreciate, and both of those things are critically important.
Thank you, Dr. Wigfall. We had a follow-up question regarding diversity, and the question for Dr. Vega is, how do international students factor into diversity?
Well, just to take off on the comments which were just presented, and some of what we discussed before, when you have those different life experiences, you are going to be that much stronger an applicant. Growing up in a different country, in a different culture, with different linguistic skills, I think presents a powerful means to become a physician, particularly if you're interested in serving those communities. We practice in California, practice in Southern California. It's one of the most diverse areas in the country. And those physicians from many different countries are so important. The connection you make with patients when you share something with them, and it could be something small. You both have small children. You both have, you like the same flavor of soda. Then you try to wean them off the soda because soda's bad. Together, see, it's together, it's this partnership. But it's so much more powerful when you talk about sharing an entire culture that makes it not only a better encounter, and I guarantee that, and there's research that shows, those patients have better outcomes, they will live longer, their chronic diseases will be better controlled, but importantly for you, it sustains you as a doctor, and this is hard work. It's great work, it's a privilege, but at the same time, it's difficult many times. The more satisfaction you get from that connection, the better off you're going to be, and that's what creates those sustained relationships in those diverse communities that don't last 2 years or 6 years, they last 30 years. And I think that's where healthcare happens to me.
I agree. I think that's exactly correct. And it's also interesting to note that as our programs mature, we find more and more conversations, more and more thought put into culturally sensitive healthcare. How do you provide culturally sensitive healthcare? And a diverse group of applicants, a diverse group of students are bringing that cultural perspective, that multicultural perspective into the program and then into our clinics. And this actually helps that conversation. When healthcare providers weren't as diverse as the population that they served, you had to spend a lot of time really talking about how do you provide healthcare in a culturally sensitive way. Diverse students and diverse graduates bring a variety of healthcare perspectives and bring a variety of life perspectives, a variety of cultural perspectives with them through the programs and into their professional life. And I think that's a huge benefit.
But I think you also have to keep in mind with international students, not all medical schools accept international students. So you have to do your homework. You know, for us, we're a private institution. We do take international students, but they're limited numbers that we do bring in. You have to really do your homework around the country and see which are the schools that will accept international students, because most of the students who come from other countries cannot get financial aid here. So therefore, there are a lot of requirements that have to be met in order for you to be able to be accepted to particular schools.
Thank you. Dr. Wigfall, so we often hear of diversity as one of the solutions to reducing health disparities. What do you see as the role of our future health professionals here in this audience and your graduates in reducing health disparities?
It's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense. When you think in terms of healthcare disparities, you really have to think in terms of populations. You know, we were talking about this in terms of curriculum development. You can look at problems of, say, hepatic cancers in the Asian population, or alcoholism in American Indians, or diabetes and obesity in Latinos or African Americans, or hypertension, or end-stage renal disease. As a nephrologist, I have to at least throw that one in as well. Given the propensity for African Americans to develop really fulminant kinds of destructive kidney disease, part of their care is really incumbent upon all of you. So part of caring for them is a recognition and an appreciation for what those people bring to you culturally, what they have genetically as a predisposition towards some diseases or some complications of diseases. So understanding the disparities to help shape the therapy that's appropriate for a given patient really is one of the things that you have to do if you're going to be effective providers going into the future. I mean, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, I think it's great that we're talking about health disparities, and I hope all the students here understand what we mean by health disparities when we talk about that. And I think when we talk about diversity initiatives, that is one means that we feel will help to address some of the health disparities found in certain communities. I think data still demonstrates that individuals who come from underserved communities, which have a higher propensity towards having health disparities, are more likely to serve in those communities. And so as we look for more individuals who come out of those communities, the hope is that they will go back into those communities and serve. You know, as I mentioned, I grew up in East Harlem. I've spent all my career working in underserved communities in East Harlem and now in Brooklyn, Brownsville, Brooklyn, which is a very underserved community. And that's because that's where I came from. That's what resonates with me. That was my passion about going into school and becoming a physician in the very first place. Our hope is that as we increase diversity and take more students from these underserved communities who have maybe experienced these health disparities themselves, will now return back to these communities and address those health disparities. But it is only one way of doing it. It's not the only way to do it, because there are other things that impact upon health disparities as well, besides having providers in those communities. But it's really important that you guys understand what health disparities are, where we're experiencing them, and hopefully you guys will help us come up with some solutions as well as how we address them moving forward, because everyone should have equal care regardless of where they come from. And there's no reason why, I always look at East Harlem. East Harlem was a very interesting community. You had a lot of hospitals there, and you had one affluent community on the south side of 96th Street and one poor community on the north side of 96th Street with same access to the same hospitals, yet you saw different outcomes in healthcare. So there's a lot of things that impact that, not just the presence of a hospital.
Would anyone else like to chime in? Okay, so for our final question, could you give us, to the audience, some words of advice, starting with Dr. Aponte and going down the table?
Be passionate about what you want to do. This is what you want to do, whatever it is, and maybe we should speak to the broader health professions here, and I don't want to, obviously we come from medical schools, but one of the things I tell students, if this is something you want to do, make sure this is something you're really, really passionate about, and be willing to work hard at it. I don't care what you want to do in life, when you dedicate yourself to something that you love and you're passionate about, you will be successful at whatever it is. Get advice, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid of a no. And remember, it's not how you fall, it's how you recover. We will all have bumps along the road. I've experienced many of them. Some of you who attend my workshops this weekend will hear about some of that. Don't worry about those bumps in the road. Worry about how you got yourself up and move forward. Last thing is, dream big. It's free.
I think that sums it up really well. I think the word that I like is bold. Be bold. Do something big. Go out there, whatever it is, do it big, and really push yourself to do more than you think you can do. And that's lifelong advice.
I agree with both of my colleagues to my left. I think another important thing is to try to experience, perhaps not as a patient, hopefully you're doing well there, but really learn about what you want to do. So if you want to be a physician, talk to physicians, shadow physicians if you can, volunteer in a healthcare setting. If you're thinking about becoming an acupuncturist, maybe experience acupuncture, follow an acupuncturist, learn about it. If you want to be a nurse practitioner, a physician's assistant, naturopath, whatever you want to do, learn about it and be sure this is something you want to make into a career. One very short story. When I went to acupuncture school, one of the truly great people in my classes, in my cohort, did really well in everything, just really, really strong student, got into that first technique class, somebody put a pin in him, out cold, gone the next day. So really, really understand what you're getting into, be prepared, be really enthusiastic, and know this is what you want to do.
Well, I'll tell you this, just looking at this room and seeing, where you could be today, probably on a nice, beautiful day like today, and seeing you sitting here tells me a whole lot of where you're going. Absolutely. And I applaud you because you decided to be here today to get as much information as you can to prepare adequately to get into the school of your choice. With that said, for those of you who are in your first, second year, you're in a great place because, of course, now you can tailor the rest of your years and really look at experiences and see what things you can do to enhance your academic credentials for entrance into medical school. For those of you who are in your third and fourth year that have already probably gone through that, I just want to tell you there are still experiences that you can do that might also enhance your credentials. I think that for most of you, I would say that as you look into what schools you're going to go to, you need to visit these schools. You need to know more about the schools themselves, see what they have to offer. Above all, prepare adequately for your interview. Interview is very important because that could make or break any applicant. And as much as we want to say that when we pick the candidates that are going to come to the medical school to interview, that we love them all, we don't. I have been interviewing for 23 years, and I see all kinds of things during an interview. So it's important for you to prepare adequately even for that. It's not only about the application process, it's also about the interview. And above all, have fun when you do some of these activities. If it's not fun and you're not enjoying it, guess what? Then you're in the wrong field. So make sure that you pick things that you are going to really enjoy doing. I think that's the best advice I can give you at this point.
That's all very strong advice. My feeling is that in fact, what I know is that your passions and those big dreams, they're going to change. They're going to shift. It's inevitable, particularly when you're younger. And that's fine, but do stay aware. I feel like when I look at the workshops that are offered today and listen to the questions that you're asking, it's always about just what's the next level. I got to get to that next level. Got to grab for that brass ring, and that is important. And I know you're passionate, and you want that next level. You want to be that physician or healthcare provider that you want to be. But do take a minute to step back and ask why every now and then. Have a sounding board, somebody you really know, trust, to reflect with, about why you're doing what you're doing and where you want to go. Because it's when your ambitions and your ego get out of line with what you're doing, that can lead to burnout and it's not good for you. So I would just say be self-aware. Medical school is not the best time to be self-aware, but you want to find that time and actually I would really look carefully at wellness programs within medical school that emphasize this, because when it's institutionalized, I think you have a better chance to actually achieve that goal.
You've gotten a lot of extraordinarily powerful advice, and I hope that you hear it. Part of the problem with having a volume of statements is that everybody that you hear, when you're hearing them, sounds absolutely correct until the next person speaks. I'm going to take a slightly different tact. Having talked with a student who was terrified at the prospect of putting on a white coat and going to the wards because she wasn't sure quite how she was supposed to act. A friend of mine told me once that life is not a stage play. You go through it once. So you're not going to have the opportunity to redo it. So you do want to do what feels like the right thing moving forward. But don't be afraid to care. Everything that you've heard this morning, from the platform presentations to all of us, is that we're trying to deliver a message about caring about other people. But don't be afraid to care about yourself and do the best that you can. Don't be afraid to care about people who are important in your life, because they'll help to sustain you. But don't be afraid to care about patients. And with that comes some pain and some disappointments, but that's part of the territory. Just care.
Thank you very much.